The church is both my greatest intellectual and moral problem, and my most consoling home. She is both pathetic whore and frequent bride. Well, good morning and welcome to another midweek reflection where we continue our Lenten journey with our Lenten book, which some of us are reading, some of us are just dipping in and out of, Richard Rohr, Falling Upward, a spirituality for the two halves of life. And on Sunday evening, the group that's discussing the book spent some time thinking about that quote, which was from the book. And it's quite a harsh quote, isn't it? That the church is both pathetic whore and frequent bride. But if we're going to take offense, then we're going to have to take it up with God, because it's God who calls Israel both a faithful wife and sex worker in the Hebrew Testament, in passages that talk about Israel's faithfulness to God's commands and God's covenant, and how Israel perhaps isn't fulfilling what God called Israel to do, to bring justice, to be a blessing to all nations. So what about that quote? Well, I think what Richard's saying in it is that the church is both a sanctuary, a home, a family, but it's also an institution with all the flaws and irritations that institutions possess. So at least that's partly what he's saying. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who can relate to that. I'm sure I'm not the only one who gets irritated and saddened and irate at some of the things that the church says and does sometimes, but who is also comforted and amazed and inspired by who the church can be. And for me, of all the images of the church that we can think of in the Bible or outside of it, salt of the earth, branches of the vine, body of Christ, etc., I think the picture of the church that works best for me, the image, is that of a family. And this week we've been reminded again in the media of the, let's say, complexities that can come with being a member of a family. And Jesus' family was certainly not free of differences of opinion. So my question for you today is, if the church, whether the global church or your particular local one, was to be likened to a family, a fictional family, what family might that be? A few years ago, President Bush Sr. said, quite famously, that he wanted American families to be more like the Waltons and less like the Simpsons. But what about the church? Are we more good night Mary Ellen, good night John Boy? Or do you think we're the latter, more eat my shorts and dope? If you were to liken the church to a fictional family, who might that be? Perhaps, like me, you might think of the following, just to get you started. Perhaps you might think, he says, as the book falls on the floor, that we are a bit like the Incredibles. That each of us are unique and we've each got our own superpowers, but it's only when we share them with one another, when we unite and come together as a family, that we can transform the world. Or, maybe more traditionally, you go for the Pevenses. The brothers and sisters who go through the wardrobe, who eat Turkish delight, who go on adventures far and wide with the wild but wonderful Aslan. Or, for me, perhaps the most apt, and the film that I've bought at least 3 times but couldn't find it in my DVD collection, I think I've lent it to someone, but anyway, is the Hoovers family, the family from a wonderful film, one of my favourites, Little Miss Sunshine. And it's fair to say that they could be described as a dysfunctional family. You've got a stressed out mother and bankrupt father, the son who loves Nietzsche and refuses to speak, the daughter who's obsessed with beauty pageants. You've got the gay uncle with poor mental health issues and an addict for a granddad, but with a heart of gold. They're a family who certainly have their differences, but who, in journeying together in their clapped out camper van, perhaps another image of the church, learn to accept each other and love each other deeply. And when they eventually get to their final destination, they dance together with wild abandonment. For me, that might be something of the image of the church. But what about you? Have a think. Which fictional family do you think the church is most like? You might just want to give that some thought. You might want to share it in the usual ways on the WhatsApp, on Facebook, perhaps emailing Marcia or myself. So have a think about that. And for now, with Mothering Sunday or Mother's Day coming up in a few days, which can be a time of great celebration and lament for others, perhaps particularly this year as most of us can't see our mothers or those who have been like mother figures to us. So with that in mind, a few words from a fictional mother who had something to say about family. Mrs. Doubtfire told us, there are all sorts of different families. Some families have one mummy, some families have one daddy or two families, and some children live with their uncle or aunt. Some live with their grandparents, and some children live with foster parents, and some live in separate homes, in separate neighbourhoods, in different areas of the country, and they may not see each other for days or weeks, months, even years at a time. But if there's love, dear, those are the ties that bind, and you'll have a family in your heart forever. Go well, have a blessed week, and see you next time.